May 18, 2022 meeting of the Hinsdale Zoning Board of Appeals to order, please. Chris, roll call.
Oh, that's good.
Member Moberly?
Here.
Member Giltner?
Here.
Member Murphy?
Here.
Member Lee?
Here.
Member Pudliska?
Here.
Chairman Neiman?
Here. Next matter on our agenda is the approval of minutes from February, March, and April. John Pudliska has emailed Chris several changes, which, Chris, you'll,
I did them.
all right?
Yeah,
Are
they're all
all
in there.
in the record, or will be in the record. Does anyone else have any other edits other than those that John emailed Chris about? Of course not.
I don't take it personally anymore.
Okay, do I hear a motion to approve the February, March, and April minutes as amended?
So moved. Second.
Roll call, please.
Member Moberly?
Yes.
Member Giltner?
Yes.
Member Murphy?
Yes.
Member Lee?
Yes.
Member Pudliska?
Yes.
Chairman Neiman?
Yes.
Thank you.
Next matter on our agenda is the approval of the final decision or findings of fact in case V-02-22, 307 South Lincoln Street. Anyone have any changes to that draft final decision? Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Roll call, please.
Member Moberly?
Yes.
Member Giltner?
Yes.
Member Murphy?
Yes.
Member Lee?
Yes.
Member Pudliska?
Yes.
Chairman Neiman?
Yes.
Thank
Next
you.
matter on our agenda is receipt of appearances. If there's anyone in the audience who intends to address the board on any matter this evening, if you could stand up, and Kathy, if you could administer the oath, please.
You each of you do solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
So I'm going to adjust the order of the items on the agenda and call the old business, the matter under old business, which is Appeal 01-22, 110 East Ogden Avenue, which is up just for a status this evening. I thought we could, rather than making everybody wait, we could have anybody who wants to talk to us about the status of that matter step up now and tell us the status.
Good evening, panel. I am again Jared Staver here with my wife Kelly Staver. We're just basically coming back for status before you. I will tell you, I think the last time we were here was in March. The board gave an unequivocal, clear directive to the owner and contractor at 110 East Ogden to go back to the Planning Commission and revisit their site plan. To my knowledge, to date, Mr. McGinnis can confirm this as well, they've done nothing, zero. We've had no showing of any good faith effort whatsoever on their part. So that's where we are to date.
Okay. Mr. Morris?
Thank you. Yeah, I don't have a lot to report either. There are two significant developments that I wanted to advise the ZBA of. One is, I think Rob may have emailed earlier, but at least passed out as an FYI, a letter that the village sent to the property owner's representative. You know, as a result of this appeal, we looked back at some transcripts and such and saw that there'd been representation at one point about keeping some of the landscaping along the back at least, and based on that and the fact that at an earlier major adjustment, there was a fence that made it back into the plan after it had been removed at some point. The village advised the owner that they should come in for a major adjustment and clean these issues up so that there's no issues with a certificate of occupancy. So that's been sent. And the other thing that I wanted to point out is that I learned yesterday, and Mr. Walsh was here, in speaking to him, that they are planning to do some additional, add some landscaping And I know they had reached out to Rob yesterday as well about the major adjustment process, correct? And so I believe that's on the horizon, and that there's going to be some additional things added. And I don't have a lot more detail than that to tell you, but I just wanted to let you know that things are moving in that direction, and hopefully we can reach a resolution based on that.
Okay, please.
Good evening, my name is Patrick Walsh. I represent Dr. Hartman and the respondent on this thing. I appeared before you back in February. There has been conversations with village staff and Dr. Hartman, Mike Zalad, the builder. They've talked to the village arborist about adding arborvitae and some other matters. I know, I just read some of the draft minutes that the first part of this appeal was denied, and the zoning board has kept that open for the second part. So they're in the process of seeing what can be worked with the village and the village arborist, and Rob's aware of it. So that's where that is. So I don't know I was a little late. I thought we were later on Your Honor, or this board's agenda. Used to be in court. So I don't know where you're at with, on that final part of it, but there is movement contrary to representation.
So let me make a suggestion. You're under no obligation to have a conversation or several conversations with the homeowners if you don't want to. We can't force that. But it seems to me you're not going to resolve this amicably and at the least expense to your client if you don't do that.
Well, I would suggest to you that it'll probably work out better than what you think. When I talked to Mr. Staver in the past, he denied even speaking to me. But there is a plan that Dr. Hartman's put in about additional arborvitaes, actually additional 2 to 3 shade trees. Unfortunately, the conversations with Mr. Staver have not been productive, but we're trying to get around that by working through village staff and the village arborist. So that's where that's at.
Do you yet have a sense of what sort of adjustments you're going to make with the landscaping? You mentioned a couple of things, but do you have specifics, or are you still working through
No,
that?
we have a pretty good idea on the arborvitaes. There's going to be a number of additional arborvitaes to kind of fill in. The arborvitaes that were approved on the plan, they've grown. We put those in early. We're not even ripe to put those in yet because we're not close to a certificate of occupancy. I really don't think that's going to happen until July. But in anticipation of this, there's Dr. Hartman's talked about multiple arborvitaes and then 3 shade trees, which is more than what was there. It'll completely block the stavers as it grows.
The additional landscaping will block the stavers, as well as the landscaping will block the office building from the stavers?
Well, it's not going to completely block it. Those trees have to
Right.
grow. They're not going to go in as full-grown
Right.
trees.
Right.
But they're estimated to go, 14, 15 feet beyond what some of those deciduous plants were. So, and then the 3 shade trees should be a lot bigger. They're talking about some kind of crabapple trees or something that'll be white in color.
Okay, so I'll take one more pass at you. For those of us who are lawyers on the board, we've all been in litigation where the parties and the lawyers can't stand being in the same room with each other. And the only way matters like that are resolved without costing a fortune is by setting everyone's egos aside, getting over your hurt feelings, and sitting down like civilized people.
Yeah.
And I
I don't have any hurt feelings.
I'll suggest something else.
I'll make that clear. I have no hurt feelings, but we're
Then
trying to
your
work.
client does,
Oh.
okay? So, as I said earlier, you don't have to do this. But both sides have irritated the board beyond measure in this case. Sit down in a room, put your egos aside, resolve it.
I appreciate the suggestion. I'll pass it along. Anything else?
No. Yes.
I just am asking for clarification because it's my understanding that now the letter went to the owner that a certificate of occupancy will not be issued until they go back and ask for a site adjustment. And they're talking about already planting different trees, and I'm not sure, is that going to be going for approval, or, because there's also the issue of the fence.
Rob, could you shed some light on that, please?
Sure. So the letter that went out to the property owner, the 110 Ogden property, stated that they would need to come back to the board for a major adjustment. The record is muddy enough that we feel that there's benefit to all parties in getting some clarification. The fence, the existing landscaping, and the treatment of that soft lot line are all in question. The applicant will, or the permit holder, the 110 property, will come in with that application for major adjustment. They'll bring that before the Board of Trustees, and the attempt there would be to clarify what the intent of the board was when that plan was originally approved. I'm sure they'll discuss the fence. I'm sure they'll discuss the landscaping, and then the board will make a decision from there.
As a matter of cause, do we get notice of that as well? Do they have to send out certified mailings to all the residents within the vicinity of that?
There will be notice, yes.
Okay.
And so we'll have an opportunity to attend these meetings as well? Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rob, do we need to do anything? I'm trying to remember procedurally exactly where this was. We were talking about how long to defer it. I mean, are we at a point where we need to say deferring it until June, or does it just, I can't remember how we left it.
So, Michael, you can jump in if I'm missing something, but it's my recollection that the appellant in this case, the Stavers, need to approve the continuation of this item, given that we're not in a position tonight to really make a decision on this one way or the other. Certainly from a staff position, I would encourage the Stavers to agree to another continuance to some date certain, rather than to simply argue that the matter's not ripe and then arguably dismiss it.
Right, at the last meeting, I think it was generally felt by the ZBA that members that while count 2 was not ripe for administrative efficiency, rather than dismiss everything and have them refile later, they were going to continue it and kind of see how things went. And so that's what brought us here. It sounds like things are still pending. So if you want to continue it again based on that course of action, you would of course need the Stavers to agree, because that's what our code says. But otherwise, that would be your course of action. And if they don't agree, then I think you have to deal with count 2 at that point.
Mr. and Mrs. Staver, could you step back up, please? Would you like to continue the matter for 30 or 60 days? for one-
60 days might be good, the way it sounds. Send it sometime in August or July, whatever.
July.
Be fine.
Let's set it over for a status in July.
If I may first.
Sure.
Thank you. I think it's my client's intention to get those plantings done if, they reach with the village arborist and the village to do that. They're not going to do that early if this panel or the zoning board decides to send it out too far. You can still accomplish the same thing by kicking it another date after that. It's been kicked down the road a lot. But if there's agreement with the village and they have a plan, and this restriction isn't there, there's no other destruction that's gonna take place on our property. But it might expedite things to the Stavers' benefit, actually. So we'd object to that too long of a date, because if this goes down as we think it might be, it might get done a lot quicker.
I thought we lifted the restriction last time. You're free to plant or do whatever you want to at the back. I know you don't want to do it. Usually landscaping is among the last things done with a major construction project, and I understand that. But I thought we said we lifted any restriction. Did we do that last month?
That's correct.
Yeah,
And
For the back,
That's correct.
did I misunderstand you? I thought you said they weren't gonna likely go back for a certificate of occupancy until July.
we think that's gonna be the case, but if things progress and we're able to get things moving, obviously my client wants to get open much sooner. I don't know if there's, I just needed clarity, because I thought in the minutes, and maybe I misread in my notes all the way back to February, but, that was going to, that stay for the work on the back would stay in place.
no, it was lifted last month to allow planting.
If there's gonna be additional
Specifically,
planting.
yes.
Right, and the issue, if you set your, because you're gonna need landscape inspection and approvals of whatever you do, to set it over to August may kind of hinder opening as opposed to, to helping you. So I would suggest that we do June or July.
Are you
and see how it
suggesting
goes.
less than 60 days?
Yes.
You're suggesting less? I thought you were
That's what
suggesting.
I
I'm
thought-
saying less, and then
that's what I
if
thought you
need
were
be,
That's what I thought you were saying.
Okay,
you have the ability to kick it out further.
yeah, that makes sense.
To accommodate whatever concerns.
What I'm hearing from Mr. McGinnis, the village has mandated that they go back through planning, providing all of us residents within the certain area notice of that, so we're allowed to attend those meetings. So what I'm hearing is they just sort of think they can willy-nilly start planning things, but that is not what I've been told, and I have a letter that Mr. McGinnis has shared with us, directed to the owner, which says you must go back to planning and submit everything again regarding this fence that was supposed to be in there, regarding all of the matters which Mr. McGinnis just stated. So I'm not sure that they're hearing that, and maybe it'd be beneficial if Mr. McGinnis just clarifies that.
Sure. To clarify, it's up to the Board of Trustees whether this actually gets remanded back to Plan Commission. So this would be applied for as a major adjustment. The Board of Trustees has absolutely every right to clarify their intent when they approved this originally without referring this back to Plan Commission. Just point of clarification. Yes.
Right, but there's not gonna be a neighborhood-wide mailing. We'll let them
No
know,
public
right?
hearing. No public hearing.
The neighbors that originally requested the fence wanted to know, it was
Okay, we
not-
need everyone at the microphone, please, who's.
Yeah, if there's somebody else who wants notice, we're happy to
Yeah,
give
I
it
mean,
to them.
they were still under the impression that a fence was gonna be built until we spoke with them recently. So they're also not happy with the way things are working out, and they wanted to go to the Board of Trustees meeting last night, and it was recommended that we just wait, and this was a status update hearing, so they also would like to probably be informed of what's going on. Because they were the ones that originally requested a fence, and then if you go back in the meetings, it says the fence that they told the board that the fence will not be constructed because we'll have enough arborvitae's and enough screenage where it won't be an issue to walk through.
Is this the other family that's party to the appeal?
No.
It's not. This was Greg Peters. This was addressed twice last year at the hearings that you guys weren't at.
Could you identify yourself for the record?
Dr. Carol Hartman. Yes, this was Greg Peters. He sent a kind of a fluke email to, I'm blanking on who he sent it to at the village. We postponed our planning commission approval maybe for 2 months each time, waiting for Mr. Peters to show up. He never came to any of those meetings to state his opinion for the suggestion of the fence. And then it was discussed who is Mr. Peters, and he is not adjacent to the property at all. He lives on the other side of Fuller Street, and the property is not anything to do with anything adjacent to us. So it was kind of learned that that was someone making noise if they didn't want to show up and state their concerns during that original planning commission meeting, that was let go. So I guess a year and a half later, I guess if he's ready to come forth amongst the board, this will be the third time that this has been reviewed. So just so everyone knows the story of what happened, that particular person who requested the fence did not show up to the meetings twice.
I propose we kick this 60 days because I don't want to do this any more times than we have to.
Thank you.
Yeah, that all being said, we're happy to give notice to Mr. Peters.
I need to just ask one more clarification. This is, I think, for Rob. So when the developer brings this major adjustment back to the village, just to be clear, first of all, are you talking about the village board?
Yes.
And is that as part of a one of their board meetings?
Yes.
So it's
The
public,
regular board
there's an
meeting.
agenda, it's
Yep.
announced? Okay, so that's one way that's notified, right?
Yes.
Okay, and then it's at that point where it may or may not have to come back to the ZBA if there's
Right,
a
correct.
resolution?
So if they find the changes to be in substantial conformity with the original intent, all that kind of stuff, they don't have to send it back to the board for further hearings or review. And in fact, for minor things of this type of nature, relative to the overall project, I would imagine they wouldn't, but I can't say.
Right, okay. But then assuming it goes to the village board, major adjustment gets presented, village board is okay with it,
Yeah, it's
then.
approved in
it's
ordinance
approved,
form.
then there's still action for the ZBA to close out this applicant's appeal, or, correct?
If you continue it, yeah, that would have to be the case, yes.
Okay. But that's the sequence?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
If there's anything that's still at issue, it could all be made moot by what the
Correct.
board, okay.
Yeah, hopefully it would be
Yeah.
mooted by
Oh, yeah.
the board
Got it.
action.
Okay.
Okay, so we're setting it for a status in 60 days, July meeting. Thank you, Mr. Morris.
Thank you.
Next matter on our agenda, well, I forgot one item. Receipt of requests, motions, pleadings, or requests to make a public comment of a general nature. Is there anyone in the audience who wants, who's not here on one of the matters on our agenda?
Your audience just left.
Well, I don't blame them. Okay. Next matter on our agenda was the pre-hearing and agenda setting on case V-04-22, 457 South Clay Street. I understand that matter has been withdrawn. So the next matter on our agenda is case, for public hearing, case V-01-22, 527-541 Kensington Court subdivision.
I'm Patrick with Moment Design. Julie
Patrick,
Watts
last name, please.
is Fortelka.
You might want to, Kathy, do you need a spelling?
No, I haven't, thank you. He's in my dictionary even.
So we're coming before you today with a little bit more information on our fence, partial gate, and wall at our new development on Monroe. From the feedback that you gave us the first time around, we have made some adjustments to the design, most notably kind of reducing the amount of masonry at the entry gates and the walls, lowering those walls a bit as well. We originally had come to you with the hopes of an 8-foot tall fence and gate, and have lowered all those components down to 6 feet. And then we've included some color renderings, so you guys could get a better kind of overall view of what all the sort of structure is going to look like in 3 dimensions.
Patrick, I'll make you, you can see that this is the latest one. I'm pretty sure I got this in the packet. Is there a date or something? Is this the latest one? Okay. Now, how tall is this wall here then? That was 6 feet tall?
That is 6 feet tall, and so is the gate. The piers are 8 feet tall on
Okay.
either side. If you turn to the AutoCAD, the 2D version, black and white, it has dimensions on it.
Oh, here?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, there should be one more page. There you go. So they're also getting, so you've got to kind of swing, but this is 8 foot, that's our 6 foot.
Okay. Okay.
So
He's
that's-
just pointing out how high different things are.
Yep, and that's fully dimensioned on the plan above there, so you could get a rough idea of the overall dimensions of the wall and such the gate. That it's back from the property line as well. It's a little more visuals than last time. That is the original.
The old one.
the
Yeah,
original
you can share it with
Okay.
me. It's in, was in, it's not attached to the application, Tom. It was a separate inclusion behind that.
So I guess it'd be helpful for me just to go back to what, with these adjusted drawings, what's the variance that's required? What could you do without a variance, and what are you asking for with the variance?
And Rob could probably fill in some gaps on that front. I believe only a 4-foot high open fence is allowed kind of at all on the property line. So we're hoping for a variance of the 6-foot high open fence portion that you see, the wrought iron portion. And then the wall, we are allowed, is it 8-foot tall masonry piers for a fence typically?
Correct.
We are asking for just 6 feet on those masonry walls that are flanking the fence. No portions of this are taller than 6 feet, except for the piers flanking the gate, because there's an actual piece of hardware that holds the gate itself as it slides open, and it needs to be taller than the gate itself, if that makes sense. So those 2 flanking components on either side of the gate, we're hoping to be taller than 6 feet so that the gate mechanism will work correctly.
And Rob, if we approve this, it's still got to go to,
Can you speak up a little bit?
I'm sorry, if we approve this, it's still got to go to the board and the plan commission?
Not necessarily. Again, it would be handled as a major adjustment, so the Board of Trustees would consider it. If they were comfortable approving it as a major adjustment, they would keep it at the board. If they chose to refer it to Plan Commission, then they could certainly do that. But it doesn't move on at all without at least 4 affirmative votes by the ZBA.
Okay, but we can approve a fence, but I mean, there's the driveway in, covering that with a fence. I mean, that's not really within our jurisdiction, is it? The whole notion of
Well,
creating
Arguably it is.
Okay.
And that's the reason they're here, because ultimately this street ends up private.
Right.
So if this was, the board wouldn't entertain a gated entrance into a subdivision unless all of the improvements were private. So arguably, it does fall within your purview. So I guess framing it another way, an affirmative vote tonight simply gives them the right to something taller than what the code permits, but they need to go to the board and/or plan commission to get the approval to do something beyond what the code would ordinarily permit. So you're kind of first stop.
Okay, that's what I thought.
So Rob, you referenced last week there was another gated subdivision in town, south, on county line. What is the name of that again? I went by and saw it. I was trying to get the name
So
of it.
Woodland Park Court
Woodland
is
Park
across
Court,
from
that's
KLM.
Okay.
That was handled very similarly. Additionally, we've been working with the HOA at Foxgate, which is just across from the water tower by the high school. And they've been talking about a gate for years. That will likely not need to come before you due to the height of it.
I guess I have a question for the applicant. So are you familiar with the Woodland Park Court, that subdivision?
Yes.
Okay. That gate is a wrought iron gate, and I think it's attractively landscaped on both sides, and you can see through it, and actually the pedestrian portion, of the gate is, you kind of just walk.
Could I see that?
Ride a bike through the wall. Yeah. It's very handy to have those things. So why can't you do something like that, rather than, I guess it's the solid wall. I'm very, very troubled by that. And this is a black, I actually didn't notice this before. If you had a wrought iron fence that people could see through, because you're not totally blocking any, you're supposed to go back to the microphone, but, so people can hear you.
Yeah,
But that's just my general question is, if it looked more like that, I'd be a lot happier about the way it looks, rather than the wall.
So that's why I took this picture,
Okay.
because I actually drove in here, the gate was open, so
Okay.
I could drive in, and then I'm taking the picture looking out.
Okay.
And so what you're seeing across is actually KLM.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I did the exact same in Kensington.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. And what you're looking at here is a parking lot. It's a monumentally different look, and so I hear you, but our circumstances aren't the same at all. It's not full of cars right now because I went right when I came here when the office is closed, but generally, that's all cars, and it's a completely different look than a beautiful park.
But you can still see it. I mean, because you've got you can see it from the fence, because your fence is not solid. So they're gonna see it. They're gonna know what's there anyway.
Yeah, and I've got to say, it's not necessarily just security. I believe this fence that we're referencing is just security, our gate, we'll say.
Okay.
Ours is also about aesthetics, that we believe our solid gate is aesthetically more attractive than the little kind of iron spigots on that gate. And it's also about the hopes of what we hope this whole development ultimately becomes, more of a communal engagement of all of these houses together. And the gate is kind of reinforcing the idea of that development. Most cul-de-sac living, as you know, is kind of people all living in the backyards as best they can. In this case, we're trying to develop this hopefully for empty nesters that will have the idea of more of a communal aspect to the courtyard feel of the development. And that's what the gates are essentially for.
And when you're in looking out, you can't block the street aspect with anything except a gate. You can't have plantings or anything there because you have to drive.
Yeah, I struggle with that because I get the concept of what you're trying to accomplish. I'm thinking, the time that someone's looking at the parking lot is, it's not like there's going to be kids playing in the cul-de-sac. It's not like people are going to be putting chairs out to view out that way. It's going to be when they're driving out. Because the other times, they're going to have to put up screening if they don't want to see it from their yard. But that's not what we're talking about here. So I would rather, I come at it from the standpoint of the community as much, if not more, than the residents in there. And I would be in favor of a wrought iron gate with minimal of kind of the other walls, and create a gated community, because I think that's what you're selling, is being able to provide this sort of sense of security when they're not there. But I don't think the full gate with no transparency through it is really in keeping with the neighborhood. And I'm okay with the gate, but I would say it's only if it would be this more transparent wrought iron gate.
So can I ask a question and
Sure.
break that down? So you use two words there that I don't think, do they have to go together? More transparent, does it have to be wrought iron? Because we do, like, I like the wood gate and, you know, this isn't really your problem, but this is a big risk for me to take on 8 homes. They're jewel box homes, they're very high end, and so I'm very cognizant of creating a very high end experience, which I believe is what the town wants. We all want great houses, and so this aesthetic is very important to me, and I think I mentioned this at the last meeting, that my contract is contingent on how this all goes. And that's in no way meant to be threatening, it's just a little bit of a tipping point for me when I still feel that the aesthetic is there. So we do have an option for a more open wood gate, which is sort of a middle ground.
I have paper. Would you guys like to take a look? Or?
Sure.
Well, sure.
So this is 50% open, right? Patrick? 50% open. So, you know, trying to hear what you're saying, but doing it in a way that maybe meets both of our needs.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. And this was not meant to be a pejorative expression, but it just feels like it's a compound.
Understood.
No, but people,
And
my sister lived in Abu Dhabi and they lived in compounds. It's because you have to be in Mexico City. And I'm not, this again, not trying to be mean, but that's kind of like you want everybody, you want your people in and you want everybody else out. It's not what it sounds like with the gate.
Just like the aesthetic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, compound
That's
is
just
a
not,
word.
but to me, that's just not what Hinsdale is. I mean, we're open. Kids run from block to block trick or treating, and people go up and down streets on Christmas Eve looking at the Christmas lights. It's just we're a village of neighborhoods, and so that's why the compound thing
And
just.
I completely hear you, but I have so many friends moving to the Burr Ridge Club because that option doesn't exist. So I'm trying to straddle the line of, listen, I've lived in Hinsdale for 27 years. I love it. I love the community aspect, but we want to provide them this experience that's a little different than we have to
Yeah,
offer
no,
today.
I'd be very interested to hear what other board members have to say. It would be the first time that sort of a gated community is been built here. That's not a reason to deny it. It's just, I've been here forever too, and I'm just not comfortable with having this be, the time or the place for that type of a gated community. And I agree, it has sort of a compound feel to it, an exclusion, sort of exclusivity feel to it, which you is a selling point for everyone else, but those residents, I'm not sure if they would see it the same way.
And might I add that if this was more in town, I think the gates do become sort of an imposition to the community, whereas this is truly on right the edge of our residential district with Kensington School right next door and then the orthopedic clinic across the street. Granted, there are houses to the south, but this is, right off on the edge there. So, yeah.
We don't have a buffer district there, we go from commercial to residential.
I think that's true. Like also on, I was thinking about that comment. Like York Road, it goes from commercial to residential, like right away. Oak Street, where the Chase Bank is, it goes from commercial to residential right away. County Line, whatever that was, that Star, whatever that store is. My wife goes to that store. What is it? The big store in town, Whole Foods. Thank you. I bet you shop there. Whole Foods, commercial, it goes right to. So it happens else. It's just a fact of how Hinsdale is because we transitioned from Ogden to residential, within a block in most cases. And there's a lot of them between Madison and Washington, and they're built right there on Ogden. The residential houses are. So, anyway, that's.
So Rob, let me raise a procedural issue. Your memo, I'm just wondering if the application for a variance itself has to be amended, because they've now reduced the variance that they're requesting from a 4-foot variance, at least as I understand it, to a 2-foot variance. Because a 4-foot fence wouldn't need a variance, right?
But the fact that it's solid does. So a solid fence can only be 2 feet.
Okay.
So we've kind of commingled fence types here. We have both a solid and open fence in those corner side yards. A solid fence is limited to 2 feet in a corner side yard. An open fence is permitted to be up to 4 feet in a corner side yard.
Is it accurate to say that the zoning variance application as written, as it's still before us, is asking for 8 feet, but your memo is saying 6 feet based on the representations of the applicant?
I think the application is still accurate. There's an exception in the fence code that allows for a driveway gate to be up to 8 feet. But the fences themselves
Okay.
are limited to 4
So we
feet.
don't have a procedural issue in terms of
No, I think we're okay with the application.
application needing to be amended. Okay. So, okay.
This doesn't bother me, particularly with the lower fence. I mean, this look particularly, I mean, I do think, yeah, sorry. This doesn't bother me particularly lower. I mean, it did seem a little off-putting when it was all 8 foot tall. Given where it is, I don't have a problem with it. I really, I understand the issue with being right across from the parking lot, and there's a lot of visibility through here. I just don't, I mean, maybe it's a little like a compound, but it's not like an Abu Dhabi compound.
No,
It's-
I've never
no,
been to
but
Abu Dhabi.
no,
My
but
sister kept wanting me to go,
but
but
it
it just
does-
feels like we got the bad guys out and the good guys in, or maybe it's the other
And
way around.
I
but,
just
you know,
don't,
that's what
I
it
just don't
feels
see
like.
this just doesn't feel that same way to me. But
Okay.
That's
fair.
where I am.
I agree. I really appreciate the effort and the attempt to sort of bring things closer to what is, the actual requirement. But personally, I live a block off of Ogden, so I do understand that security risk. People come off the highway and they're looking to make a quick, a quick hit and run, and Ogden's easy for them. So I understand the need and the concept of security, because you're basically one lot off of a really busy street. So, and I do appreciate that everything else is open besides, just sort of that entry portion. I think I definitely would prefer the gate that has a little bit of, it's got 50% openness to it. I think it's a little more approachable that way.
I like the gate that's wrought iron, that's open much more. And now we've got, the fencing is already like that. So I think we're back to this notion of the view that you have through that fence as opposed to the security issues. The wrought iron fence is gonna provide the same level of security as the fence that you're proposing. And I still get the sense of an entryway to a prison with, even though you've got it opened a little bit more, and I guess that the view that you gave us, I'm not sure how that's gonna actually look in terms of how open that's going to be. The wrought iron I can picture, and you already have the wrought iron for the rest of the fencing. So, this security issue can be dealt with a wrought iron fence without having that sense of a bunker that is conveyed by an opening, a gate that's much more restricted in terms of its view. And in terms of the problem we have with people that come off of the expressway, I mean, we all live with the fact that there's an intersection there at Ogden that's easy on and off access, and there are certain risks that go with it. We all enjoy the convenience of it. We can jump on the tollway and be off on our business very quickly. So there's pluses and minuses to that. But we've kept an open community. We're facing some more threats of recently than we've had in the past. But I'm uncomfortable with moving quickly toward gating off our homes and creating this sort of bunker mentality. Maybe we have to come to that point somewhere further down the road. I'm not willing to do that now. And I don't want to open up that trend. What we're looking at here is, again, the same as what's over at Madison. That's been a cul-de-sac there for years. It has the different view, of course, because they're not looking across at the parking lot. But in terms of access from Ogden, they're actually right there on the street. You've got the Kensington School as the buffer between this development and Ogden. They don't have that. They've got a very tall brick wall separating themselves off from the actual highway. You don't need that because you have the Kensington School there. But I'm not comfortable with the notion that we've reached the point where we need to have that level of a security fence. I think that's still in the realm of requesting a special privilege that makes this not appropriate for us to grant a variance.
I think the wood looks better, actually, than the wood fence looks better, I think, than the wrought iron, or the gate, I should say, for what it's worth. And I don't think we're setting that much of a precedent by this, because it's pretty unusual circumstance, but doesn't sound like there's support for it.
So, let me raise one other procedural issue here. You need 4 votes. We're short a board member. We're not going to be short a board member next month. I don't know if there would be support for the variance as the variance application is amended next month either, but it's, from what I've heard, there are at least 3 no votes this evening. And keep in mind, we haven't even asked you yet to go through the 7 criteria that you have to meet about why you think you should be granted a variance, why you meet those criteria. As I pointed out last month, your application answered the questions yes, no, no, yes, 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 no. And so we have no understanding whatsoever as to why you think you meet any of those standards, and you have to meet those standards. It's not just this ephemeral discussion of should we allow or should we not allow a gated community. There are legal standards that you must meet, and we haven't even asked you yet. Well, yes, we have. The application asked you to explain why you met them, and you didn't. So, let's start with the easy part. Would you like to would you like to continue the case until you have a 7th board member here next month, which might give you an extra yes vote?
No, because I have, I'm supposed to close at the end of July. I've already put a lot of time and money into this, and I don't even know who that is or what their thoughts are. It seems like a bad bet to me. I don't know whether they're for or against, or.
Okay, just keep in mind from what I've heard, I haven't even expressed my views yet.
Yeah, I was gonna ask that.
You've got 3 no votes, meaning the variance isn't gonna pass, from what I've heard.
So can I ask a question here?
Sure.
So it seemed to me that the no's weren't solid no's, they were yeses if it were more open. Is that your understanding?
Well,
Correct as to me, yes. I mean, we haven't decided anything yet. So we're expressing views, and those views can change based upon what we hear.
So we just today came up with a last option, wondering if this
We
was.
keep at this long enough, you're gonna,
Well, this
there's
starts-
not gonna be any
this
fence
our
at all.
last chart. Our last
I
chart.
like,
So
I like the way you're barking.
we got nothing else after this.
We're trying our best.
Yeah,
Yeah, and we're trying to find a middle ground that, I don't know if you guys know the work that we do, like, the aesthetic is, that's all we've got to sell these. And I have to take the risk of 8 high-end homes on my dime. Like, the aesthetic is all I have. And so, and not like I'm the end-all be-all, but there aren't a lot of people wanting to do what I want to do here. I know there's been other interests, but nobody wanting to build a high-end community. I don't know, at some point, it's not a good thing for me if I can't get to the aesthetic that I'm comfortable with. But that being said,
Yeah, aesthetics
this literally, I didn't even see it till I got here tonight.
Yeah,
so.
this is a third proposition for you guys to consider, kind of a hybrid of maybe the iron gate and a solid.
When that's closed, what does it look like? Is that wrought iron?
Yes.
Oh.
I would say the pickets up top are wrought iron and it has a solid base. It has a bit more of a substantial frame than the other gate that we had looked at.
I hate that other gate, if it matters.
And I think
The see-through,
aesthetically,
50% one?
No, the one at further south.
The wrought iron.
The wrought iron.
Is that
Really?
close by, is that anywhere near?
That's very
her?
similar to
I just
your,
found this
what's the,
online.
what's
It's
the
just
one,
another kind of,
I'll ask you in a
option
second.
where this center portion is all iron and open. We've got a solid bottom on it, so. And happy to re-illustrate. I came up with this just today, like, what if we don't get our gate at all, so.
Do these swing in and out? Or do they slide?
Yeah, we couldn't figure out the traffic, backing up.
So those aren't really, it would be that kind of a gate, but it would slide
Yeah,
instead of.
it'd have straight on views.
Got it.
But where it is even more open than our 50% proposition, still has a solid frame and a solid base. So,
We can live with the aesthetic like that.
But the Burr Ridge Club, I mean, I drove by, I've spent a lot of gasoline on this variance so far. But that's an open concept. That's still,
There's someone in the gatehouse,
Oh.
it's all wooded and it's.
but they've got, what, 70 homes or something? It's a much bigger deal.
Yeah,
So
of
it's
course.
They can do all that. But it's still, it's attractive from the exterior. That's all I'm trying to say.
I mean, we're also.
And we're getting there.
There are gonna be people after us, after we leave. That will be there when we're long and gone. And we have to think about that too. And so in
I
20
appreciate
years,
your position.
that will be built up, landscaping will be in there, whether, but the gates will be there. And, I mean, I think it's a compromise that it's even, a gated cul-de-sac, right? That's what you're requesting, but that's also unique. So I think, my view is, I think, at least in my opinion, there's a compromise, and, there's alternatives to what you're proposing. Aesthetics is subjective. And I know it's also market-driven to some extent, and you're in the business and I'm not. But that's not, my responsibility as a member is to look at it from the community as a whole. And so I'm trying to balance that with, tax revenue for the village and all that. And I'm just struggling with anything more than what is typical for residents, in Hinsdale. And for me, it's this wrought iron, not even what you proposed. I understand, though, the village board is the next step in this process, right?
That's correct.
So if there's an approval with maybe condition, then there's still some discussion on even what that gate looks like at that point? Or it doesn't have to?
Yeah, I mean, I guess at a high level, the aesthetics should be left to the village board, right? But we all know that at a human level, your consideration of an approval is absolutely predicated on what something looks like. So it
it does get a little bit muddy. It does get a little bit subjective. But yes, you would have every right to approve with conditions, and at that point, it would move on to the board, who would certainly respect those conditions.
Can I see this?
Your offer of extending it, at some point, I've had to continue my, my contingency with the seller who owns Kensington. At some point, he's gonna say no, and I don't know where that lands either. And Patrick just said there's no risk to waiting, but then my risk is that I lose my walk away. It's a tough decision,
I've got some history, and I hope your seller's watching this. Can I
yes,
just,
I'm
let me- give me 90 seconds of rope
I'm
here.
sorry.
Your seller received substantial concessions from the village to put that daycare center there. It was a compromised position. It's a nice-looking building. It's only one story. He's got the big yard back there where the kids play. But part of that deal, while he stood in this room and said, we're going to have code compliant housing behind us. So that's what we are, but, well, we're not there yet. So that's why I really, if he's got to wait, then he can call me up. We can have a candid conversation, because he received just a lot of consideration from this village. So, he'd probably rather deal with you than deal with Paul McNaughton or one of these other folks. So he
wants this to work
yeah.
because he knows it's good for his school.
You're right.
It's good for the aesthetic.
But he can take a chill pill. Tell him I said so. 'Cause, he's been getting, he got a ton of consideration 3 or 4 years ago. And I think if we need another month to get this right, then don't worry about him. If you've got financing you're worried about, if you've got the stock market you're worried about, you make your decision for you. But he should not be he's not my concern.
And let me point out something else along the same lines. 5 minutes ago, you told us there's not a bunch of buyers waiting in line to develop this property. Now you're saying, oh, if I continue it until next month, I might lose the deal because the seller's going to walk away. Which is it?
That's not exactly what I said, I'm sorry. At the price point, the other potential buyers aren't selling their homes at the price point that I was. They're more of the lower price point houses. So yes, there are other buyers, no other buyers building high-end luxury homes.
Just for fun, what price point are you thinking about? If you can.
In the twos.
Okay.
And to circle back on who we're hoping these buyers are empty nesters, no kids. They're almost all, 6 units are ground floor master. They're going to be here 6 months out of the year. They go to Naples in the winter. That's kind of the market that we're going after. Low use kind of taxpayers from that respect.
Okay.
No kids in schools.
So what I'm hearing from the applicant is they don't want to continue it until next month, until we have a 7th member. So is
I don't know,
the,
I'm thinking about it.
Well, I think it's a lot of burden to put on this mystery 7th member. I mean, that's not really fair. I don't know who this person is. I wouldn't, because frequently they might say, I need to abstain because I haven't heard the previous 3 hearings, so that would be fair if they did this. I don't know. Just,
Do we think it would be helpful to explain that if we have a no vote, what the ramifications to the community would be?
And it's over, right?
Okay, I wanted to just make sure you understood that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess. It's like a little bit of a trick bag, I don't know. And I guess if I said yes to wrought iron, then it would move forward, and then do I have another chance with the board? Like, I'm a little lost.
So if this was approved with conditions, if they voted, if they gave you 4 affirmative votes predicated on an open gate, a wrought iron fence, it would be very unlikely that the Board of Trustees would then flip.
Okay. And is like the wrought iron, or is it a percent open?
Good question.
I just feel like we're negotiating on the fly here. I guess I kind of wish
I'm
I'd
trying
seen.
to understand
Oh, I know.
what you're trying to
I wish I'd seen all these options like in our packet, and we could have, digested them. It's just difficult to just digest stuff at Well, my
So,
stomach is
I mean, maybe
rumbling.
that's a good reason to continue. I mean, much as I hate that, I don't know, it's just hard to, you know, every day I spend dollars on this. I meet with Patrick, I have to pay his bills, I have a landscape
We've got all the floor
architect.
plans designed, so.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in deep, but not as deep as I'm gonna be in. I don't know. I mean, I guess.
So can I ask, are you completely opposed to wrought iron?
Well, I hate it. Completely. I
Other
do
than that,
hate
it's
it.
great.
Because,
It's a-
because of the
That's
aesthetics?
what,
Because of the aesthetics?
yeah, I think it's ugly.
It'll be a bit of
I
a
think
design
it-
challenge, but I think if we worked on it, maybe we come up with something that can make my client happy and make you guys happy. That's what our job is.
Right, that's what I'm really trying to understand. What exactly are you after?
Please
Open-
keep in mind that before we can exercise any discretion at all here, the burden is on you to meet each one of those standards in the code. And one of them is that what you're asking for is not merely a special privilege. And you've got the burden of proving to us and showing us how this isn't a special privilege. And this discussion we're having now about price points and things like that, you're walking yourself, in my view, you're walking yourself right into a special privilege discussion where your burden is to show us that that's not what's involved here. The other requirement, there's another requirement that says that there's no other remedy. So as we're kicking around various kinds of gates here, you're walking yourself into the problem that you're gonna have of demonstrating to us that there's no other remedy other than the one that you wanna go with and ask us to vote on. So you've got some heavy burdens here before we even have the opportunity to express our discretion as to whether or not a variance is gonna be created, to demonstrate to us that you're meeting these standards. And it looks like you may be having a difficult time. I don't want to prejudge this thing, but you've got the burden of showing us how you've met each one of those standards, and it appears to me that there's going to be some hurdles there that you're going to have a hard time overcoming.
All right, I'll ask that it be continued.
Okay.
Not happily,
No,
but I'm
okay.
asking.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the request to continue the public hearing on case V-01-22, 527-541 Kensington Court until our June meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Member Moberly,
Yes.
Member Giltner,
Yes.
Member Murphy?
Yes.
Member Lee?
Yes.
Member Pudliska?
Yes.
Chairman Neiman?
Yes. I'll emphasize one more thing before you go, since hopefully next month's meeting will be when we actually make a decision. I agree with what John Pudliska said a moment ago about the need, as I've said a couple times now, to address those 7 criteria. And one of the things that I suggest that you give some thought to is, given that one of the criteria is that this isn't a special privilege, you've emphasized both last month and this evening that your desire to have a walled, gated community is because you have a certain marketing plan for the area. That's, you're perfectly free to have that marketing plan, but that doesn't mean that what you're asking us to do, which is to a large degree not in keeping with the community, there's only one other gated community in town. I think it's a difficult burden, as John mentioned, to explain why that's not a special privilege. You want to market it this way. Okay, that's your privilege, but that doesn't mean that it's not a special privilege. And so in addition to that, all of the other criteria, I'm troubled by how you get around that one. So just give some, all I'm suggesting is be prepared next month to address all of the criteria, and for me, that one in particular. Okay, we'll see you next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next public hearing, case V-03-22-933 South Grant Street, the applicant asked us to continue it until next month. So we're down to new business. Any new business?
A motion to approve the continuance of the second
Oh,
one as
I'm
well, please.
Sorry, I thought we had, wow.
The one you just mentioned.
Yeah,
I don't think we need a
the oth-
motion.
The second
For
one.
the grant?
If they
Well-
kicked it back.
Do we?
Do we need?
Well, will you open the
just
hearing?
take that from
I
the
think in the
agenda.
past.
Is there a unanimous, agreement to?
Yeah, voice
To
votes.
conti- voice vote to continue that case until next month,
Yes.
Yes.
based on the applicant's request? Okay, cool.
Thanks, sorry.
No, my bad. South Grant Street has been continued. Any new business?
When is this new person starting? Do we know?
Next month, I guess.
The village board appointed Mr. Gannon O'Brien.
Irish?
and It sounds
Is
like
he a
it.
lawyer?
I believe so.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm not 100% sure,
Okay.
don't quote me. But anyway, he was appointed last night.
I don't think he is a lawyer.
Maybe he's not.
He's a real estate guy.
I second it.
Is he? Oh, Gary.
I'm sorry.
He might well be a real estate guy.
He's a real estate guy. not a
Wow, and
lawyer.
he's gonna be great. He's gonna have so much common sense, so much personality. Oh, my goodness.
I will ask him as well to maybe
All
watch
we
the
need is a
videotapes
developer
on,
next.
on this.
Another developer.
To be up to speed.
Okay,
So we adjourned?
we're adjourned.
Oh, are we?
See you next month.
Right.
All right,
Thank you,
so
Kathy.
here's my others.
Yeah, yeah.
Preposterously coincidental small.
I think the Clay Street
So
was
there's
also.
your, let the record reflect, Kathy, I gave you your pen back. I did not lick it
I
either.
had a habit of asking Karen these philosophical